The story of Native American struggles during British colonization and the early years of the United States. The story of Native American struggles during British colonization and the early years of the United States is one of resilience, resourcefulness, and resistance amid overwhelming adversity. From the arrival of the first settlers to the establishment of the United States, indigenous peoples faced systematic displacement, cultural suppression, and brutal conflicts. Yet, through it all, they fought to preserve their lands, traditions, and identities against seemingly insurmountable odds. When the British settlers first arrived in the early 1600s, they encountered a network of vibrant, sophisticated Native American societies. Tribes like the Powhatan Confederacy in Virginia and the Wampanoag in New England initially extended cautious cooperation, sharing agricultural techniques, knowledge of the land, and participating in trade. These interactions were often guided by the indigenous understanding of reciprocity and mutual respect. However, these initial periods of peace quickly unraveled. The settlers, driven by their need for land to sustain growing colonies, often ignored or outright violated agreements made with native tribes. The settlers' concept of private land ownership clashed with Native American views of the land as a communal resource. This cultural divide allowed settlers to exploit misunderstandings and claim more territory. Treaties that promised mutual respect and coexistence were frequently broken. For example, the Treaty of Hartford in 1638 ended the Pequot War, but stripped the Pequots of their lands, enslaved many of their people, and outlawed their very name in Connecticut. These betrayals set the stage for centuries of distrust and conflict. As tensions escalated, armed conflicts between Native American tribes and colonists became unavoidable. These wars were not isolated events, but rather part of a broader pattern of resistance to colonial expansion and domination. One of the deadliest wars in American history on a per capita basis, King Philip's War was led by Metacom, King Philip, the son of the Wampanoag chief who had initially allied with the Pilgrims. Seeing his people's lands consumed by English settlers and their sovereignty diminished, Metacom rallied a coalition of tribes in southern New England. The war was marked by devastating battles and the burning of entire villages on both sides. Native warriors inflicted heavy losses on the settlers, but their defeat resulted in the near destruction of the Wampanoag and Narragansett peoples. Survivors were either killed, enslaved, or forced to assimilate into other tribes. The war crushed organized Native resistance in the region and allowed colonial expansion to accelerate unchecked. Following the British victory in the French and Indian War, Native American tribes found themselves increasingly under British control. Ottawa leader Pontiac, recognizing the threat to his people's way of life, united a coalition of tribes across the Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley. Pontiac's forces successfully captured several British forts and laid siege to Detroit, dealing a significant blow to British authority. However, British retaliation was brutal. In one of the most infamous acts of biological warfare in history, British officers distributed smallpox-infected blankets to native tribes, devastating their populations. The rebellion ultimately failed to achieve its objectives, but underscored the deep resentment and resistance among indigenous groups to British policies. Colonization brought not just physical displacement, but also an assault on Native American cultures. Missionaries sought to convert Native peoples to Christianity, often through coercion. Traditional ceremonies and spiritual practices were outlawed, and Native languages were suppressed. Diseases like smallpox, influenza, and measles, introduced by European settlers, ravaged Native American populations. Entire communities were wiped out, with some regions losing up to 90% of their populations. These epidemics, combined with warfare and displacement, created what some historians call a demographic collapse, weakening indigenous societies and their ability to resist colonial expansion. The struggles of Native Americans only intensified after the American Revolution. The formation of the United States marked a new chapter of westward expansion, often at the expense of indigenous peoples. Signed into law by President Andrew Jackson, the Indian Removal Act authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to designated territories west of the Mississippi River. The Cherokee Nation's forced march, known as the Trail of Tears, epitomized the brutality of this policy. over 16,000 Cherokees were displaced, and thousands perished from disease, exposure, and starvation during the grueling journey. This act not only devastated the Cherokee, but also set a precedent for the forced removal of other tribes. As settlers moved westward, violent clashes erupted between native tribes and the U.S. military. The Sand Creek Massacre of 1864 saw over 150 Cheyenne and Arapaho, mostly women and children, slaughtered by U.S. forces in Colorado. In 1876, the Battle of Little Bighorn became one of the rare instances where Native warriors, led by leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, defeated the U.S. Army. However, this victory was short-lived, as relentless military campaigns and the destruction of the buffalo herds ultimately broke the resistance of the Plains tribes. Despite overwhelming odds, Native American tribes resisted colonization through various means. Leaders like Tecumseh, who sought to unite tribes against American expansion, and Geronimo, who fought to protect Apache lands, became symbols of resistance. Their bravery in the face of superior firepower remains legendary. Many tribes worked tirelessly to maintain their traditions, languages, and spiritual practices, often in secret. Today, cultural revitalization efforts continue to preserve these aspects of Native heritage. Over time, Native leaders turned to the U.S. legal system to fight for their rights. Landmark cases, such as Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, affirmed the sovereignty of Native tribes, although enforcement of these rulings often fell short. The story of Native American struggles during British colonization and early American history is not merely a tale of loss. It is a testament to the resilience and endurance of indigenous peoples. While the physical and cultural toll of colonization was immense, Native Americans have persisted, fighting to reclaim their rights, revitalize their cultures, and preserve their histories. Today, many tribes are thriving, using their experiences as a foundation for advocacy and cultural renewal. The struggles of the past serve as a reminder of the costs of expansion and colonization, while the survival of Native peoples reflects an enduring spirit of resistance and adaptation in the face of extraordinary challenges.